Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session, Advanced FlexBook Editing. I'm Katie, one of the CK12 team members, and my colleague Lindsay and I will be running today's webinar.
Before we get started with the content of the webinar, we always want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with their Zoom webinar windows. So you guys should be seeing two different options on your Zoom screen right now. One that says Q&A and one that says chat. During today's presentation, whenever you have a question for CK12 or Katie, who's presenting, post it in the Q&A window. The chat window is a place where we like to foster community conversations. So if you guys are already introducing yourselves and where you're from and what you teach, that's awesome. Please keep that going. Just make sure that in the chat window, you're selecting all panelists and attendees so everybody in the community can see what you're posting. Also, while we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, if you need any assistance with your video or your sound, just let us know in one of these windows. We have created a resource page for you that if you would like to have it in front of you now, you're welcome to do that, or just know that this link is available to you at any time. It's at the top of the screen here at tinyurl.com/CK12ADV FB, our abbreviated version of Advanced FlexBooks there. And we're also going to put the link in the chat window right now. You're welcome to print these resource pages or save it to your desktop, and we hope that you can use it after as a reference for when you are working on your assignment or when you're editing FlexBooks throughout the year.
Thanks, Lindsay. And thank you to everyone who joined us for today's session on Advanced FlexBook Editing. In our Getting Started with FlexBooks session, we covered the basics. That included finding content on CK12, simple edits, and sharing your content with students and others. If you missed that session, I highly encourage you to watch the recording or join us for a future offering of that session. In this webinar, along with a brief review of basic edits, we'll be covering the following topics. So we're going to start with incorporating, formatting, and citing images. That'll include our licensing, uploading, editing, and attributing these images, and then the figure versus inline options that we have. We'll next go into embedding videos, interactives, practice quizzes, and more, including our ability to now embed clicks in rear reads as well as Google Slides or something like that. We'll move on to using our math editor and special character menus so that you can either use our drop-down options or write your own code for math equations if you want. And we'll wrap up with enhancing your FlexBook. So adding formatting options, including links, detailed pieces to kind of cite and add information, and a little bit of information about our print versus online views for our older books that we have on our site. So our main goal is that by the end of this session, you understand all of the options you have as you customize and then you enhance content on CK12.
Okay, but let's kick off this webinar by asking you guys to respond to a poll that we're going to launch here in a second. We just want to find out a little bit more about your knowledge of our editing tools. So you guys should be seeing a poll on your screen, and we are asking you guys, what experience do you have with using and customizing CK12 FlexBooks? And please notice that it says select all that apply. So choose any of these that apply to you. I am new to CK12 FlexBooks. I've used CK12 FlexBooks as is. I've made basic edits. I've added images. I've embedded videos, practice quizzes, and/or simulations. I've linked CK12 modalities or outside resources. I've used the CK12 math editor. I've built CK12 FlexBooks from scratch. And our new exciting addition, I have used CK12's new FlexBooks 2.0. So we will give you just a second here to lock in your answer. Looks like most of you have responded. We'll give it just another second here. And this is always just interesting to us as we, are guiding you through this webinar experience to know if we have a lot of folks who are brand new or a mixture. So why don't we go ahead and close the poll and we can share the results here. And there they are. All right. Kind of splits. So over half of you are new to CK12's FlexBooks, but then there's quite a few of you who've used a CK12 FlexBook as is, and have maybe made some basic edits, which is great. So a lot of you probably joined us for our Getting Started with FlexBooks webinar, and that's why you're here, is because you're ready to do these other things that are on the bottom half of this section. So perfect. Why don't we close out that poll, and let's get started here. So just to refresh you on a few points about basic customization of a FlexBook. You'll see some of this again in this webinar as we work our way through, and we're happy to go through it if you have any questions, but we'll focus on the advanced components for this particular webinar. Okay, so you can click Customize to start this, or from your library, choose Create New Modality. You can delete and or reorder content. So you can click on the X to delete and to drag arrows to reorder. And hopefully this looks familiar to a lot of you guys. You can add content and edit content. You can add content from within the editor or when browsing. Edit content using the pencil icon for any read, chapter, or book. And you can share our content via a URL through our classes, through our integrated LMS, or through our Share plane. You can also assign content directly to Google Classroom, just like you would for CK12 classes if you want a score report. So I think we're ready to get into it here. Let's have Katie show you all the components of adding new images to your FlexBooks.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. We're going to just start by, I'm going to show you these two pop-up screens about images, just so we can go through them a bit before we jump over to the CK12 site. So the first thing is basically kind of choosing your image. So it gives you the option to choose a file or use a URL. We generally recommend that you choose to upload a file cleanly as an image file, because URLs change all the time and you don't want your images routinely breaking in your content. So we definitely recommend that option. The second tab right now has a number of options that we're going to go through, including the type and position and captions and all sorts of fun stuff. But I want to bring your attention to the bottom of that source and credit part at the bottom, and it tells you your license. So when we license stuff externally from CK12, if you're using our content, it's licensed under Creative Commons non-commercial use with an attribution component. It means you have to cite what you're using if you're using any of our stuff. And so we ask that when you upload content, you make sure to give the credit to where it came from, even if it's something you made. If you simply put your name in there, then the next person that goes in knows that you made it yourself, and they don't have to go trying to track down the source and credit if they want to make sure that they're in compliance with that licensing. That source and credit will soon be moving to the first tab. So if you're uploading images down the road, we want to make that as easy to access as possible. So just keep that in mind. But for right now, that's where they are. So I think I'm going to steal the screen away from Lindsay and share mine. And then we can go through kind of what that looks like on our site. So hopefully you all can see our CK12 homepage. You'll see kind of things are updating as we continue to work our way through the years of worth CK12. So hopefully you'll see some extra options. But I'm going to start with looking for a piece of content. So let's pick a section from a FlexBook to edit. So I could do this simply by searching for a topic within life science, let's say. And then I could go into some pieces, or I could actually open a textbook itself and then click on a section that I wanted from there. So in this case, if I'm starting from scratch, note that I'll have the customize option on the left side. So I'm going to click that customize, and I'm going to start making changes in this book. And then I can actually, we're going to just update the title. So webinar, February 2019. I recommend you put your school name in there just so that you know that that's the book that you're working on. And let's pick a section in here. So if I go into this particular section, I can open this section and I can edit it. And that little pencil edit icon is your indication that you can edit that section. And it will open that section up within CK12 and save a copy of the section in my library. So if I'm looking for this, I'll even put it in here now as well. Webinar, February 2019. So when we look at our library, it'll be really clear that this is the one that I'm editing today. And then I can go in and I can actually start editing the content within this particular section. So if I haven't made any changes, I can simply go back. Once I start making changes particular section, then it will start seeing all of these different pieces. So if I happen to be in a section like this is a header section, this learned behavior section, you'll notice that like the image or the media icon is blocked out. You'll see that sometimes if you're in special formatted sections. So I always recommend that when you're uploading and adding any kind of content, in this case images, even though you can do it, you don't really want an image in the middle of a header. So I'd recommend that you pick like a new section to work with. So let's go here. I'm going to scroll down for a bit. We're going to actually upload a new image right in here. So this particular image I have as well. So option A is I can simply click on an existing image and then either right click to edit that piece, or I can actually just click directly on the image option at the top. And let's see if we can grab that again. There we go. So if I'm looking at this, it pulled up that image. This image was originally uploaded, and so when I look into the image options part, you'll see all sorts of different options, including the links to the places that it came from. So I'm actually going to copy these for a second, just so I have them accessible. And if I open that link in a different tab right now, it's actually 2 different Flickr links, so I'm just going to open one of them to start. And this takes me to the original image. It has right here an attribution requirement, so it says I can use this, but I need to make sure that I am citing Katie Hunt, who made this image. The same deal with the other one if I put that in there. And you'll see once again that this one also, the some rights reserved, that's your little like attribution requirement for stuff. But those 2 images together are what we kind of combine together to make this particular image. So if I wanted to upload this separately, let's say I hadn't uploaded it at all, I'm just going to start a new line. We're going to insert an image. There's nothing here to start with. And I'm going to choose a file. So in this case, I'm going to pick my desktop. And we're going to go up here. We get our learned behavior image that I was working off of. I'm going to open that up. And then I'm going to click over to that image option piece. And I have a couple of different options. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put that source in. So I'm going to pull this source, and in Flickr it's actually really easy. You can kind of just pull the quick little code from Flickr, add it in here, oops, as my source. If I needed to add the second one because it includes both of them, I would do the same thing. I'd get a nice little code there, and then I'd put that in as well. And then I'd start putting in credit. And because I've done this before, I have those 2 names already pre-populated in here. But that makes sure that I'm putting in that source and that credit part. Now, the next thing is that we want to talk about the difference between figure and inline images. So the first one that is already in this particular read has set as a figure. So if I click on this, I'm going to put this one as inline. So you just see a little bit different options. So for inline, I can choose my pixel width. Let's say maybe I want to do this about 400 pixels wide. And I could put alternate text, like lion cubs and dogs playing, which is what this actual one is. Usually you'd have to type that in, but I've done this particular image before. And that kind of information goes in this particular piece. So I'm going to insert that. And you'll see that this image is inline. So I could start typing text afterwards, whatever that looked like. Whereas the other image that we have here is actually a figure image. So here, my options were postcard size, or a thumbnail size, or a full page size. So let's say I change this to a thumbnail. It would then shrink it to just a little icon, whereas a full page size would actually expand it to the entire width of the page. And there's actually a good example further down here that I'm going to pull up. See this one right here? If I change this from a thumbnail to full page, it's going to do the entire width of the page for that image. So this image is now massive because it's a super tall image. So just keep in mind that when you're talking about width or the dimensions, it's based on the like the width as opposed to the height when you're working on stuff. So I'm going to go back up here. We're going to talk about some other options in here. You'll see this has a caption, this left and right caption. So if I pull that up, you can see left here, that's that caption that it will put in underneath the figure. That when I did inline is grayed out. It's not something that you can actually include in an inline image because your image is directly in the line of the text. So you have all sorts of different options kind of as you work your way through. One thing I do want to note is that it really doesn't matter in terms of figure versus inline when you're working on the computer. That's going to show up where it is. It's except this kind of caption piece. When you're working with a printed version of our text, so if you're using some of our older text or you're working in our 1.0 environment, figures can move. So a figure is set to automatically kind of fit the best place possible to put as much text on any page as possible. So if I actually look at this particular piece as a printed version of this text, because I'm in one of our older books, I can scroll my way down here and you'll see we have some, a figure right here. That's what that looks like. We have this little one that I added as, 1 figure, 2 figure, kind of the thumbnail, postcard, and then a full width option when I did this before. And then a small figure there, and then the one that's like the full page that doesn't even fit on this page. So just keep in mind that width piece, and also that if needed, that could bump to the next page. So I generally say if you're like writing a math equation and then putting a graph of it, you want to make sure you're using inline so that it always sticks with the text if you are working offline as well. So just something to keep in mind. So it's pretty straightforward to add images to our stuff. We go in here, you're just using that insert edit image from scratch, or you're clicking on an image and opening that window up to actually get the ability to kind of change some of those image options. And as we always say, make sure that you are citing your source and your credit so that you are in compliance with our copyright. So that might be a good place to pause for a second and see how we're doing with questions.
Well, Katie, you must be doing a great job showing everybody because we don't have any questions right now. So let me just remind everybody that the Q&A window, go ahead and post any questions that you have. We're going to stop periodically, and Katie's happy to demonstrate anything that you guys have questions about. And if there's not anything happening right now, then we can continue on with the demonstration, and you guys can think about what you want to populate in that Q&A window.
Okay. Great.
So are we going to switch? What's up next? Embedding with CK12? Oh, no, we've got a question. What's the ID for the figure picks?
Okay, yeah, let me talk about that for a second. So in here, this ID, so this one's an inline image, so it's not, you don't get an ID option for there. For the figure ones, it will put an ID option automatically. You don't need to fill that in. In this case, I think when we created it originally, we put a specific ID in, but that will auto-populate. So if I click on this top one and I switch it to a figure, and then I insert it, now I have a figure, and it should auto-create an ID for you right there. And what that allows you to do is actually to hyperlink to it within your text. So if I'm creating a link, and I can talk about links now, but if I'm creating a link, I could do a type of link, or you can see these are all the figures that are in my particular piece. So I could reference that figure later on in my text and leave a hyperlink to it, and it would jump the student back to that image so that they could reference it really easily. So that's what that ID does, but it's not something you need to fill out. It's just something you can use later on if you want to.
Okay, great. A question here, which actually might be a good one to toss out to the chat window as well. What are some resources for allowable photos? And this is probably tricky because there's no one great answer when we're talking about photos that are license compliant. But Katie, what do you think are some good hints for how to locate those? And then, like I said, anybody who, if you have some websites you love, go ahead and post them in the chat window.
Yeah, search Creative Commons, so I can show you what that is. That's a great place to start, and you can start setting kind of requirements for using it for commercial purpose, modifying, adapt, or building upon stuff. So that's a good place to kind of start from there. You do need to be careful though, because I've definitely found that in the course of kind of going backwards and forwards in different places that some filters have changed over the course of time. In general, you're allowed to post content that is in the public domain, so that is completely free to use for anyone. And then the other one that we say is completely valid to work off of is something that's Creative Commons kind of attribution only requirements. Those are the two least restrictive copyright licensing, where you just need to cite that source, and that's where that kind of really important piece is at the beginning there. So that would be my recommendation. As I said, Flickr does a really good job. Here's this example right here, where when I click on it, it says some rights reserved. And if I check that out, this license is your attribution generic. You're allowed to share it, you're allowed to adapt it, you're allowed to basically do everything you want as long as you attribute it. So give appropriate credit and indicate if changes were made. So that's kind of the requirement for there. So I tend to like Flickr for images because they make it super clear which license it's on any cases. So that might be a good place to start, or a general Creative Commons search. But making sure that whatever process you work through, you always double check at the end that where you're working with is in the public domain or like has very few restrictions on it based on our licensing. And then I think the last.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think the last question that I just saw in here was switching to the printed version. So actually, that was me cheating because we're in the middle of a webinar and I didn't want to have to download it and upload it and all the rest of it. If I finalize this draft, so if I work from here and I finalize it, if I'm working on content in our kind of older resources, I have the ability to download a particular section. So I could download that PDF right here, and then I'd have that accessible for my students. But I downloaded it and just pulled it into my browser so that you could quickly see it and I could reference it without having to go through the whole process in the webinar today.
All right, I think that's all of our open questions for now. So why don't you continue on to show them more about embedding?
Okay, great. So I'm going to go back to my library just so I can see the whole book that I'm working off of. You can see in my library, I have the 2 resources, kind of the book that I customized and then the section that I was customizing available. So I'm going to open the book as a whole and pick a different section right now. So let's edit this. So you notice that now, instead of having the option to customize, because I've already started this book and it's my own book for today, that I have the option to edit it. And that kind of is a good reminder that you're working off something you have previously customized and not re-customizing a brand new copy into your resources. So let's pick a new section. Let's go down here. And we have chapter 10. And then we're going to kind of stick with some sort of animal theme as we're working our way through from here. So let's pick the importance of mammals as my section that I'm working off of. And I'm going to do the same thing again. I can choose to leave the title exactly as it is. I don't actually have to pick a new title. So maybe for this one, we'll just leave it as that particular title. And we'll jump right in. So as you're editing, you can see that you have your images there. And then anywhere that you have something that looks like this, that is embedded media within our site. And so you'll see this particular one, it's cited as being at this link. If I click that open in YouTube, it will open this human planet video that's embedded in that particular read. And so YouTube is kind of the easiest option to work off of. So if I was gonna, let's say I accidentally deleted this section and I said, oops, I actually wanted that video there. I want to go over to YouTube. And under YouTube, I have my share option. And I can simply copy the URL from here, or I could copy it directly from the top. CK12, I just put it right in here. Oh, let me do my shortcut key. There we go. CK12 will automatically embed that content directly in there. Now, it won't do it if I'm kind of in the middle of this bulleted list. So notice how that's grayed out. But if I actually place stuff in there, you might be able to fudge it a bit, but I'd recommend not being inside a bulleted list if you're embedding media. So we have this particular resource. I don't need the extra copy of the link. And I have my video embedded right there. That's how we got it in there in the first place. The other option, and I'm going to show you this just in case you're working from something that's not easily auto-embedding, is in YouTube, if I click share and I click on embed, you'll see embed codes here. Now, for those of you guys that use embed codes all the time, if you want to change the width or the height or something like that, you're clearly welcome to do so. You can click start at a certain time. So I could choose to start it, maybe 15 seconds in if that's where I wanted my students to start. And then it would add a little start time piece in there. So all sorts of fun things with the embed code. And if I'm using an embed code though, instead of just pasting it directly in the text, I'm going to get out of my bulleted list. I'm going to be able to access my media, and I'm going to paste my embed code right here. And then I can preview it and say, yep, that's the video I wanted. We're good to go. And I could insert that as well. And so I'd see that either way, I get the embed code option and get this little box for that media. But in one regard, I just simply pasted it in and it auto-embedded. In the other regard, I put a little bit of restriction on it, or I could have chosen to adjust the width or something like that. And then if I save this, so I'm going to finalize this for a second just so we can see what that looks like. And you'll see that it should have 2 videos at the bottom because I didn't delete the extra one. And we have those 2 videos right there accessible, as well as kind of a quick link in case I was printing this, able to pull that up in a separate browser and I wouldn't be able to access it digitally. So I'm going to go back in. We're going to edit this some more. We're going to talk about some other options. And this concept is the importance of mammals. So let me go to CK12 and let's pull up the importance of mammals, that whole section that I'm working off of. So we're in life sciences. And I have the text that I'm working off of, this read section from my book. I have the video I was just working off of, and we have some other resources. So we have real world application, and we have practice that goes with it. That's our digital adaptive practice. And you can actually embed practice, or if you created your own quiz, you can embed your quiz. And whether it's practice or a quiz, on the left side right here, you're going to see these 3 little dots and the option to embed. And what that does is it pulls up an embed code. So I copied that. And in addition to kind of this review section at the bottom, I'd say, here's your explore more, here's your review. And then I could say, try this digital practice. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before, which is click that, put an embed code. And when I preview it, you'll see that it has that practice page directly in there. Now, one thing to remember, when you embed stuff, if you assign this text, you're not separately assigning the practice. So if you want a score report for your practice, you do need to assign that separately. But if you just want them to try some stuff out while they're working through, you're welcome to include it this way, or include it and also separately assign it for that piece. Now, one of the coolest things that we just did is we actually made it possible for you to now pull embed codes for our interactives. So you know this is all about like different parts and mammals and different kind of things in here. I know some of this stuff is like the importance of ecosystems. And so maybe let's say we wanted to add an example here. So I'm going to choose a Plix interactive, and we actually just launched an explore option here. So I could go from here and click on Plix and explore. I pulled one up earlier just to make it easier, but if you kind of navigated through your Plix, and we have, I think I have an interactive somewhere around here. Let's see if what is right here. We have a Plix interactive. Now, you have a couple of options. So effective today, because we did a release yesterday, up in here, you can open this and you can now pull the embed code for your Plix. And there are 2 options. There's the basic one and the complete one. So I'm going to actually copy both so you can see the difference between the 2 of them. So let's go back here and we're going to talk about, environmental Plix. And we're going to embed option A. And then right below it, I'm going to embed the other option, which is this piece right here. And this is the full Plix with all of the questions. So this second one includes this interactive. It includes all the questions that go with it from here. And you'll see kind of what that looks like. Oops. And if you just did what I did, which is try to paste an embed code directly in your text, it's not going to help you. So we are going to use our embed multimedia option and insert it that way. So now if I save this particular piece, you'll see 2 different options. The first is just the interactive piece. So the cool thing about that is that you could talk about kind of ecosystems, you could talk about different parts. If this try it, you could just have students kind of, it gives a little description here, and then actually they can play with this interactive and say, okay, let's talk about this. How is this different? Which mice have, a better shot at being, attacked by predators or not? Or you could do this full launch option, which launches that Plix in a separate window. And it actually opens the entire Plix from there. So just know that those are your two options. We kind of recommend that first one if you want to build your own introduction and just have them play with the interactive right here, and they can play with it directly in the text, or if you actually want to embed the whole Clicks and have them launch that as a separate option. Now, just remember that all of these interactive pieces aren't really available offline. So if you're going to start including them in there, that would be something if you were using our text more in an online environment. We're going to open this one more time to show you one more option for embedding content. While this loads, you can find, I'm just going to open a random simulation. You can find the Sims embed code in the same kind of like little menu to expand. And that just gets the same launch option that you would get for the full Clicks type deal. So Sims and Clicks, both available, but Clicks have that second one where if I go to here, I could embed kind of the short version with just the interactive or the complete Clicks interactive. The last option that we had someone do that I thought was really cool that we want to share is if you were doing a Google Slides presentation, you could actually embed that. So this is a set of dogs that used to be floating around the CK12 office. I think many of them are still there, not all of them. Some have moved on with their owners. But in a Google Slides presentation under File, you can choose the option to publish to the web. And when you do that, you could choose to embed it and then pull an embed code from there. So basically, where you can pull your embed codes from, you can then use that and embed that wherever you want in here. So for fun, we'll say for fun, check out the CK12 docs. And then we're going to choose our little embed that piece, and insert it. And just kind of one little thing to remember, I know many teachers create Google Slides presentations for their students that involve a number of different resources, some of which might be copyrighted, some of which might not. If you're embedding that content in here and sharing it with others, you're now making it public. So just make sure that if you go down here, anything that you have, there's that, practice, and here's our slide presentation. So all of that content that's now easily available to your students or anyone with a link to your book, it still fits within our copyright piece as we're working our way through. So all sorts of options for embedding content, videos, interactives, practice, Google Slides presentations or otherwise, both within our site and externally.
Katie, we had a good question come in while you were demoing, asking, can you make some chapters unpublished so that students only view what they are currently working on or have already covered in class? What are your best practices if teachers are wanting to just kind of hide sections of their book?
That's a good question. So if we look at our library for a second, you'll see that this particular book has a number of chapters. What you could do is that you could kind of say, okay, I'm going to customize this book. And I could add like this, you can add as much or as little of this book as you want. So let's say we're just doing an introduction to life science. If I pick that chapter, I could add that chapter to a new FlexBook. And this is kind of where the piece, we'll talk about kind of 2.0 versus 1.0, but let's say I was adding it to, a 2.0 environment. So 2019, spring, life science book. So I could add this section by section if I wanted to. And then if I go to my library, I could see, they would literally see a book with a single chapter in it at that point in time. And then over the course of time, and I did this in a new 2.0 environment, so you could see what that looked like. It's a little bit different environment, but you'll notice that there's really only one chapter in here with those concepts. And so I could add over the course of time. There's not really a way to publish like half a book or the rest of it, because once students have a link to the book, they can navigate within the book to work off of stuff.
Well, we'll see if Lainey has any further follow-up questions on that. Another question back to copyright is, are state assessment questions and images considered public domain?
In general, I would say no, they're not. Usually the creators of those tests have rights to them. I know like when I was in Massachusetts teaching that they would release portions of those tests. But usually when they do that, there's very clear copyright restrictions on that. So you would need to check with wherever you're getting those questions or images to see what their licensing is on their end.
Okay, I think that's it with our Q&A for the moment. Again, keep your questions coming in. I'm going to take the screen back from Katie, and let's see here. Okay, hopefully you guys are seeing my screen now. We want to, before we go on to the next section, show you just 2 really short videos of a couple of teachers who have gone through this customization process with FlexBooks. They customized to best meet the needs of their students. And the first clip that you're going to see is a social studies teacher named Jonathan Wood from Tullahoma, Tennessee. And the second little video clip is going to be of Jessica Favela Casillas, who is a chemistry teacher in El Paso. And actually now I'm worried that I didn't turn on the sound, but let's see if we've got sound. Just Katie, shout out if there's no sound.
My favorite thing about it is you can update, change content, adapt to what you need for that classroom. If I have some content on there that I think is not working, or the students don't like, or that I don't like, that it's just, for whatever reason, it's not working the way I thought it would, I can find other stuff and use other stuff to change those chapters and change the format of everything. I can also upload videos anytime I want to there, upload any pictures that I need on there, any other resources, as needed. So that's what I like the most, but I can kind of form it the way I want to.
We were asked to reorganize the FlexBook that was already there and adapt it completely to EPISD and our curriculum, our scope and sequence. We added things that were student-friendly, we added videos, and I think that was a really good experience because as a chemistry teacher, I knew what my kids were needing as far as a textbook, as far as content went. And I could rely on the textbook to have videos and interactives and any kind of visual that I thought they needed that they couldn't get in a standard textbook.
We do have lots of video clips on our website, on our testimonials page, where you could hear more from educators and administrators and even students about CK12 if you're looking for, a little input on different types of use cases. But we're going to start talking about the next section for this webinar, which is using special characters in CK12's math editor.
Thanks, Linz. So I would say, regardless of whether you're a science or a math teacher, or you just want to put extra formatting for special characters, those 2 menus are going to be super useful to you. So I'm going to start by talking about the math editor, just so we can look at that screen for a second. So in that regard, we have 2 options. So let's kind of flip over to that and see that cleanly. And why don't I just start? There we go. Okay. So we have this math editor. There's a couple of options. There's a drop-down menu at the top. It then pre-populates the code in LaTeX format, and then you can see the preview of that code. So if you don't know anything about what you're doing, you're welcome to use our drop-down menu and kind of build your equations accordingly. If you want to jump right ahead and put in your own code, you can do that. But it works in one direction. Like once you start using the coding, then that's the world you live in. If you're building the dropdown, it will pre-populate that all for you as we go through. And then there's some alignment options. So you can see here, align at, inline, or block math, which is just left aligned in the line of your text, or block math is kind of like centered by itself. So we're going to jump into doing this. I'm going to share my screen right here. And we can look at what that looks like. And it looked like someone was asking about kind of finding content. So let's talk about this. Let's say I'm teaching a unit on Hardy-Weinberg. So I have plenty of options to work off of. So I could go straight to the concept in life science. I could filter to any textbook that has a section on that particular topic. So you'll see there's something on that in our life science book, in our bio book, in our Spanish versions of those books, or in community contributed. So those are books that teachers have chosen to customize and publish, and that means that you can find them under search. We'll talk about that a little bit later in today's webinar. but all sorts of options to work off of. So if I was going to do that, I could pull the middle school book that we'd been working off of, or I could go to CK12. You could explore schools, kind of schools near you that have made stuff, or our 2.0 FlexBooks, which I can access from here, or I can go straight from Try It Now. So let's work in that environment, just so you get to see the difference between that. So if I jump down to our science books, I'm going to pick my Life Science for Middle School book. And we are going to choose to customize this one as well, because this is a 2.0 book, so I would need to start that process over again. Because I have kind of the older version that I can still print that we were working off of today. But in this regard, we're going to add a February 12th option at the top there, and I'm going to pick a section in here. So let's pick the section on Hardy-Weinberg, which is right in here, and I'm going to click Edit. Now the editor looks almost identical to what it was for what we were just working on. So you can see this as well. I'm going to keep the title exactly the same way. And all of the content that was available here is the same that we were off of before. So first option is our little special characters menu. That's pretty straightforward. You can add kind of various Greek letters, greater than, less than signs, all sorts of fun stuff. So you're welcome to use that special character menu. It's pretty straightforward. You guys have all seen that if you've used any word processor. And I want to jump into our math kind of editor. And so I'm going to go down here. Let's say we're talking about Hardy-Weinberg, and I wanted to put some equations in. And I can click on this little X in the curly braces, and it will pop up our math editor. So if I wanted to write my own equation, I could say, okay, I want a function, and I want that to equal. So I could look under kind of the equation pieces, something squared. So I might just pick x squared. And you could edit pieces here, or you could say, well, I didn't really want x. I want to be able to put in whatever I wanted as my starting point and my end point. So let's say p squared, or p to whatever that is. I could delete this part right there. And maybe I wanted that f of x to be something. If I start jumping down here and I start messing with this and putting that particular piece in, notice that it clears out the ability to work up there. You can still kind of fudge it by adding in parts as well, and it will populate, but you won't have that easy little box to fill in that you're working off of. Now, if you messed up and you desperately wanted it back, you would just simply close out, start the process again, and you'll get that back to work off of. So if I go from here again, let's just toss these back in for a second. I can even just type in equals, because that one's pretty straightforward. And I want p squared. And I'm going to start updating in here. And I can preview this and see what it looks like. It looks like this. If I do block math, you'll see that it's actually in this particular piece. And I think I messed that up. So let's put the p squared here and preview that way. There we go. Much better. So you can play with the math editor in code, or you can play with it, and then I can add that to my particular piece. If I was going to add another one in here, one of the other equations for that particular model, I would do the same thing again. And I could simply write f of b equals 2 times p times q, and you're totally fine with that if you want. Or I could say equals, and then we have q squared. There we go. And I did not mess it up the last time. So I can add those in. This one's now inline, which means I can continue to type text after that and work my way through. So if I click inside this, let's say there's an existing equation here, I can do the same thing I did before, which is go up, open it up, and adjust it. But if it pre-exists in the system already, you're just going to get the code option. So notice there's not even that drop-down option there already. It's set to do that particular piece. So fairly straightforward. If you have no idea how to use this math editor, this little pop-out will help you with that. But you can kind of add equations either within text or separately in the center, kind of as an offhand part to work off of. So how are we doing on questions? Okay, so FlexBooks and FlexBooks 2.0 seems to be the big question as we're working our way through. In terms of the editing piece, the only difference that you're getting to is this related tab. But in terms of the actual books, it is a little bit different. So let me open both of these books so that you can see the environments a little bit differently. So I think I have this book opened here. So this is CK12 Life Science for Middle School. this is our new 2.0 environment. If I open this in that particular section, so we're going to go to chapter 4, the section on Hardy-Weinberg, you'll see right off the bat that there are other ways to learn. And if I click start on this section, it will open this section in a slightly different environment. So it has the text itself. We have our text here. We have an embedded video. I could add an embedded interactive or something like that as well. But there's a couple different pieces. One, this related link has other pieces. So it has a Clicks already included as a related content. Another way for students to learn, it has a couple of videos for students to learn as well. And this practice is right here. So I can kind of access that practice as well. In that particular piece, you're seeing our attempt to kind of pull all the different ways of learning and all the different pieces directly into this particular part. Up here, I have this little clipboard, and that just kind of expanded it. You'll often see it, this just as a bar. Would you like to assign this to your class? And so if I click assign, I can assign it directly to my CK12 class or a class in Google Classroom. And that will assign the text and the matching practice to your students. So kind of one holistic environment with all of your interactive components in there. But it really is designed to be interactive. You'll see if I go to the same section in our original book. So let me open that book. And I can pull it up from Life Science. We have kind of our original textbook, this Life Science for Middle School book, that's a traditional one with longer lessons, more content involved, or our Life Science Concepts book that is pretty similar to the content level that's broken down into the same way. So if I look here under the evolution chapter, you'll see similar concepts right here, and I get the same Hardy-Weinberg text. So if you notice this text matches, it still has an embedded video. It might even have some other ways that you could learn that are right here. The practice you would need to assign separately, and you might see kind of different pieces as you're working your way through. So this environment, because we're jumping in a new environment that's super interactive, you'll see more and more interactivity in those books. So I'm going to show you one other book, like our, let's say, physics one right now. So our interactive physics for high school, actually, you'll start seeing these embedded interactives directly in the text. So let's pick a section. And you'll see these other ways to learn right there. And then our content and kind of what are those simulations are embedded. Actually, I think that's a Plex embedded directly into that text. So these ones, because of the interactivity, we're adding more and more into those, are not available as a printed option. So just keep that kind of in mind as you work your way through. But if you want to hand pick your related modalities, these are customizable as opposed to in the original one. So if I went back there for a second, see if I can find that one. That's the new 2.0 environment. Here, these ones are fixed. They're rated by the system. For our new 2.0 environment, I can actually go over to the related tab, and I can choose to remove one of these, or I can even add a new one if I wanted to. And that's something that I could add a study guide to because it's tagged to kind of all of the resources for that concept. Or if I created a special quiz that I wanted them to do, I could add, these are all the anything I wanted from my library. In this case, I have a bunch of Hardy-Weinberg options tagged to the same concept. So it's the ability to customize and hand pick what you're working with and the more interactive kind of streamlined environment that you're working off of. So from there, kind of this is the next part of what we were looking at, or I wanted to move into, was all of these other resources for explaining and adding content to your book. So related, we just went through. Details for a section might include lesson objectives, information, and definitely your attributions. So you want to make sure that if you're putting in content that needs to be attributed to someone, you add that or you keep those attributions in there. And this concept right here, kind of these primary concept, the Hardy-Weinberg, is what was pulling up all of those related modalities. We also have under resources the ability to upload files. So that would be if you had an extra worksheet you wanted or something like that. If I clicked here in this particular section that's saved, my resources would be here. If I clicked it in the 2.0 environment, see if that's, nope. I think I shut that particular section. Your resources would still be available to students if there was something that was there. And then I can edit this particular section. A couple other pieces in terms of like streamlining what you're working with and going through. You have your standard, bold, italics, underline pieces. You have options for section headers or your standard paragraph formatting, bolded lists, block quote, different pieces, links that we were talking about. A page break is really only relevant if you were printing this and wanted a page break at that particular place before, let's say you put a review section or something. You can embed tables pretty standardly from there. I could do one down here. Let's see what that looked like. So maybe I wanted in my summary kind of an example of different definitions and things like that. So I could also use that piece. So we have a definition list right up here. So I could say you have your term and your definition. Let's say I put alleles because that's a topic within here and the definition variant of a gene. I could go backwards and forwards and kind of navigate within that environment and put gene pool in here again. Oops. And navigate back. Or I could just keep hitting enter and adding another term definition and kind of filling that in if you wanted that formatting from there. And then my favorite as a former math teacher is what we call our element box. So right here, an element box is a really great kind of offsetting piece. So let's say I wanted to put in that Hardy-Weinberg options and maybe put in some key formulas. I could do that. I could open this up. I could start typing in those formulas as we have. And start putting that in an offset component. So different pieces that you're working for in terms of options, all sort of helping you break up things or format things or bring attention to different pieces. The last one here is your horizontal line, which just on a screen might help kind of break up stuff just like you would on a page between text. Now, if I am working on this and I'm definitely not done, like I haven't put terms and definitions, and I just want to save this because I have to run out to something, then I could keep this as a draft. The minute I finalize it, any of my students who have access to this book would start seeing those updates, and that's when I'd kind of see them within the course of the book. So you'll see here, you have some equation text that we put in there. Here's my little element box. Here's some definitions that we're working off of. I could have added a table with parents and genes and offspring or whatever I wanted to kind of add from that piece. And actually, let's go back to this book as a whole. For your 2.0 books, you want to open the book and then choose to edit it from there. So I can navigate backwards within that piece, open this particular part up. As it loads. And you can always navigate on the left-hand side as well. I'll show you that in 1 second because that environment is a little bit different. So let me, here, I just want to note one thing on your table. So I was going to add that table, which I had started to do. I get my standard table, and if I right-click, I have some table property options. So the caption would just give you kind of that title option. I could put a border in here. I could make it that table inline. I could do a summary, whatever that looks like. You're not kind of getting this. The summary just is a reference piece more, but that caption allows me to put my title in here. And then I could start putting in, parent, offspring, and it will adjust accordingly. So when I finalize this, I did want to do that one last navigation piece because I know 2.0 is different. Here I can navigate by clicking backwards, or I can navigate by choosing my section that I was working with. So I could go back to the whole textbook. And then at the book level, if I go into the book level to edit again, I can add content resources for the book as a whole, my details for the book as a whole. But know that if you're editing content within here, like a section, within the older books, our 1.0 books, the same kind of chapter level information, whether that is a author or resource or something like that, like just like what I had in the sections, I could edit this content for the chapter in an older book. In 2.0, those are really buckets. So any introduction, any summary you want needs to go actually in the text itself. And one little note right here that says, once you've started doing assignments with your book, you want to make sure that you're not messing up the sections because they're assigning the whole section. So they're assigning section 2.2 or 2.5 or whatever that is. So if you have active assignments with that, just make sure that you're not kind of all of a sudden that section is totally gone or somewhere else. But I think we'll take maybe a question or two and do some wrap up and then stay on for any later questions.
Yeah, I think one question that would be helpful, because I think a couple people were kind of asking about this, was, is it possible to import a section from a different FlexBook? Of what if you want to combine several different books? Is that okay? And does it matter if it's FlexBook 1 and a FlexBook 2.0?
Yeah, so I'll show it to you in both directions. So in a 2.0, you can add the whole book right now. So let's say I was going to do this. I want to add this to a new textbook. And I'm going to do a like section by section book just so you can see what this looks like. So I could add the whole book at this level and then easily go into that particular piece and just delete the chapters or sections I don't want. So that was added to there. If I went into, let's see if I have one of these. So the life science book, I could actually add the entire book. I could add at the chapter level, or I could even add at the level. So a little of options kind of in terms of the level at which you're adding, because there is really that chapter structure, just like there is for the book itself. But if I went back to the chapter and I added this, I'm going to add this to that same section by section textbook. And then if I went to my library, you would get to see that particular piece. So in that section by section, we have the entire book that we had to start with, plus the added, I think, chapter that we had, although actually, because that chapter was already in here, I don't think it added a second copy of it. But in general, you'd see that piece. And you want to make sure that you're not actively editing the book at the same time that you're adding from another place. So I think what we'll do is we'll jump back to just a couple comments about publishing and wrapping up, and then continue to answer any questions as we go from there. So publishing. We just want to talk about how it happens, why it happens. There were some questions kind of about people using it, like when other people could see it. So you're going to publish on the left side of our 1.0 books with that publish button, or in that drop-down teal box kind of within your 2.0 piece, where that choose option comes up. And that's all you have to do. Once you publish it, it's now available in search, and you only have to do that once. So you can see it kind of in the 1.0 version or the 2.0 version. The advantages for that are easy access to your book, and then adding resources kind of to the collection of resources CK12 offers, just like other teachers have done to kind of help other teachers out as they go. And then what happens, so the first thing that happens when you publish is that it's now available when you search on CK12 under that community contributed tab. So that's the kind of what happens. And then the last step that you could do is you could also choose to add it to a schools page. And that would be available under schools if you wanted to kind of put a bunch of books together for your school and make it super easy for students to access them accordingly. So I'm going to turn this over to Lindsay. She's going to talk about a couple just logistical pieces to wrap up in case people want to start bouncing out. And then we'll make sure to go in and answer any questions. So take the next few minutes to add a couple more questions if you have them while she goes through those final logistics.
Yeah, I just want to point out some tools that might help you guys as you're exploring. You can access our tools and apps page from the footer of CK12, or you can go to the direct link that's on the screen, ck12.org/tools-and-apps. That includes information and links to not only our FlexBook app, but also to our practice and physics simulations app, as well as integrated learning management systems. Then we have an overview page that might be helpful to you. We talked through FlexBooks today, but if you go to ck12.org/overview, you can learn about a lot of our other resources and see short videos of teachers and students using those resources. We have several upcoming webinars. One more that's coming up in February is if you are a Canvas or a Schoology user, you use that as your learning management system, please join us on the 21st to learn about our integration with those platforms. We also just posted our 2 webinars scheduled for March. The first is a great introduction to our new FlexBook 2.0 platform. Katie did a great job giving you a little taste of it today, but if you want to do a deep dive into everything FlexBook 2.0, join us for that webinar. And we'll then offer our advanced version of our practice and assignments webinar to learn about customizing practice into quizzes and making multi-part assignments. You can register for any upcoming webinar, and you can see archived ones on ck12.org/webinars as well. This webinar will be available sometime tomorrow on the archive section of that page. We shared it at the beginning, but don't forget to check out our session resource page handout. We put the link to the resource in the chat window earlier, but here it is again, the tiny URL, CK12's ADV FB. All right, each summer we run an intensive professional development program for our educators who are looking to become what we call CK12 certified. To do that, they attend a series of 5 or more live webinars. They watch 2 on-demand sessions and complete the matching assignments. If you are interested in becoming certified during the school year, today's session can count toward your live session requirement. You'll get a link to the matching assignment for today's webinar in your follow-up email tomorrow, and you can find out more information at ck12.org/certified. If you decide to do the whole program, we can issue your certification and documentation at the end. However, if you need a certificate documenting your participation in today's webinar specifically, you can email jumpstart@ck12.org and we will get that issued for you. Just a few more last things. We do like to get your feedback. So if you have a chance to answer just a few short questions for us at tinyurl.com/ck12webinar1819, that's where we like to get feedback on what went well today, what didn't go so well, what we could do better next time. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. You will always be supported by the CK12 team. You can send us an email to jumpstart@ck12.org, to support@ck12.org, and you can follow us on all of the socials at CK12 Foundation or #CK12 Certified. So if any of you need to go, you're welcome to go ahead and head off the webinar. Thanks for joining us tonight, but stay on. If you have any questions, if you need to see any more demonstrations, we're here to help you.
Great. Thanks, Lindsay. I'm going to actually steal the screen back. We had a couple of questions. One, under that new Explore option, you could get to the schools page from here, or on the home page, you can kind of scroll down if you're a teacher and access schools. And that brings you to that schools page that we talked about, in this case, kind of resources from New Jersey, or I think Lindsay's in Kansas right now, so we could jump to those schools that have published stuff, but you can see those there. And then the question about starting a book from scratch. So if you wanted to build your own from scratch and not start from content, you would just simply start from your library, and then you would click Create New, and you would literally create a new FlexBook, and you could build it however you wanted, either a standard FlexBook or a 2.0 FlexBook. Either way, you'll get brought to this screen, and then you could add chapters or sections or pulling content from there. So definitely an option to start it from scratch. You do not need to start from content that's pre-existing, but you do need to make sure that you're pulling in content that you wrote yourself or that is copyright compliant with our site.
Well, we'll give you just another few seconds in case anybody else has any questions for us today. Okay, well, I think we'll call it a night then. Thank you very much for your participation in today's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.